Hello, welcome back to my channel! In this video, I am going to be reading and reviewing and letting you know what you should read from my subscribers' favorite books. It's a journey, it's a ride, we're gonna go on it together. Let me know in the comments down below right now what you predict my favorite book is going to be from the books that you saw on the thumbnail. Also, there's timestamps if you want to see the titles of the book. Yeah, very curious to know what you think that my favorite is, but let's get into it. Let's get into the vlog portion of this video. I don't want to get too rambly because this is a long one. I stated in a recent video that I was ready to be back in my YA fantasy era. Love YA fantasy, even though YA is hard for me, I would say, at times, as I become withered and old, sadly. Being 50% into the Ballad of Never After has not really done anything to solidify and reinvigorate my relationship with YA fantasy. In fact, I think it's done the opposite, but it is a book that is well loved by y'all. It was one of the most popular choices for books that y'all enjoyed in 2023, and you know, who am I to deny you my thoughts and feelings on something? I read the first book in the series because I wanted to have some context. I also bought the third book in the series because I'm like, fuck it, let's do the whole trilogy. If you want my thoughts and feelings on those other books, you want a full trilogy vlog, it's on my Patreon on the $5 tier, so go ahead and check that out. It's available for you now. This book picks up where the last book left off. I'm having a hard time figuring out how to describe this book without spoiling it because that is not my intention, and there are a couple of books actually on this list that are the second book in a series. So I'm trying to be strategic and smart about how I talk about this, but I think it's safe to say that this series is chaotic, to put it nicely. The first book starts out with a kind of typical, I guess you could say, fairy tale setting. You have a heroine who's just looking for her one true love, and she is willing to strike a bargain with a guy who's not so great so that she can win back her true love, who's going to marry someone else. That's the premise of the story. It's in the synopsis. I'm not spoiling anything by telling you that. Evangeline, she's on this mission. She made this deal with this guy named Jax, who is a fate, which are actors in this world. Fates are not to be reckoned with, right? They're kind of bad actors maybe, or they strike bargains with you that are maybe not the best. And so Evangeline's trying to navigate this. Trickery comes up with Jax. She's having to, I guess, fall in love with a guy that she wasn't intending to fall in love with. Things get a little messy. A fantasy plotline comes out of nowhere at the last part of this book. I think that is really my issue so far with this series as a whole, right? The first book is one thing, the second book is kind of an entirely different thing. It's not a particularly well done thing, right? I love the chaos of a YA fantasy novel. I think they can be so fun, and in ways I think this is kind of reminiscent, a little bit reminiscent of the second, A Court of Mist and Fury book. That's one book, but it's the second book of the series, you know what I mean? Where you've got Farah and Rhys, and they're going on a mission together to figure some shit out and solve some riddles, kill some old ladies, it's kind of that vibe for this book is what I would really say. You've got Evangeline and Jax having to work side by side, even though Evangeline kind of feels betrayed by some of Jax's actions in the first book. It should be compelling. It's just not. I don't know how to really articulate it besides saying that the pacing is weird and a little chaotic. I also just think that the characterization is kind of tough for me, and I can't decide if that's just because this is a YA fantasy book or if it's because the characterization just really isn't there. I tried to read Carnival by the same author before, and I did not have a good time with that. Granted, I don't like carnival stories, so that could definitely be part of it. This author and I just we don't connect, and that's okay. That's fine. We're not going to get along with every writer's writing. I think in this particular circumstance, I'm having a hard time connecting to the heroine, sympathizing with her plight, feeling like she should get with Jax, which I'm sure is the intention here. She's supposed to get with this bad boy who is mysterious and has reasons for doing things that she just doesn't know. Just not sold on him as a character, not sold on her either. Kind of insufferable, like most YA heroines are. I feel like I'm sounding like a bitter Betty, and you know what? I'm not. I really am not. Fully acknowledge that I am not the target audience for this book, and that maybe this is fucking awesome for YA readers. And you know what? It probably is, because so many people recommended this to me. But that being said, I find Evangeline to be flighty. I feel like her motivations are not super clear, and I feel like when she is presented with information, she does not act on that in a logical fashion, which again is just typical for a YA character, and that's normal. That makes sense. Teenagers don't necessarily react in the ways that they're supposed to, but it makes for a frustrating read, and it makes me have a hard time sympathizing with her when I'm already kind of being dragged along in this nonsensical plot. So it's a book. It is a time. I am reading it. I wouldn't say I'm loving it, but I am in fact reading it. If you want my spoilery thoughts, like I said, I'll link my Patreon in the description. You can go sign up for my $5 tier this month and get that and some other exciting exclusive content. But yeah, it's a book. I'm gonna finish it. I'm gonna let you know how I feel about it, but I'm feeling 2 or 3 star for sure. Well, who has 2 thumbs and knows how to finish a book? This girl right here. I finished The Ballad of Never After 5 seconds ago, and you know what? I got this from Amazon, and I don't like that there's greasy fingerprints that I didn't put on this book. We'll ignore it. Okay, I'm really kind of at a loss, to be honest. I just really fail to understand what people see in the series. Someone who understands YA fantasy, at least I like to think that I do. I understand the appeal, and there is something, I would say, kind of magical about romances that don't have a lot of smut in them. Genuinely, I think think I am burnt out on all the smut that is in NK romances and just in romance in general these days. I think there is something to be said for really nice romantic development and just like waiting for that piney to turn into something. And in YA, you're not going to see, you know, sex, which obviously makes sense. And so I think you can just really enjoy a romance for what it is, which is like, you know, the two people coming together in love. That being said, I don't feel like any of the romantic threads in these books I really understand. Like, Jax is supposed to be this kind of like dashing, sort of like ne'er-do-well that we're supposed to root for, even though he's like not a great guy and like doesn't treat Evangeline very well. And even though he claims like, oh, you're not my love, like you're not the person I'm supposed to end up with, whatever. It's unconvincing, okay? Like I feel like I've said all that I really need to say about this book. It continues on in a manner that I found to be frustrating to follow. I don't personally appreciate worlds and sort of like plot lines where things happen and then can be easily reversed and are easily reversed within a couple of pages, right? Like there's been, I think, no death in any of these books that hasn't been taken back. Like no one actually dies in this world, which is just one example of something that I find to be frustrating. Additionally, there's like curses that are put on people and taken away really quickly, and then the curse is back, and it's frustrating, and I don't feel like it leads to a world that is very interesting and a plot line that makes you gasp, you know what I mean? None of the reveals in this book feel impactful because you know in 5 seconds they could be taken away. I don't like that. I just personally don't like that. I think that's going to be a personal preference thing. I think there are books, especially in YA fantasy, where promises are kept. I don't know why this is the first thing that my mind goes to, but like Cassandra Clare books, right? Yeah, there's some like plot things that are a little fucky, but for the most part, like if someone dies, that person's probably dead and it feels impactful, right? But none of the things that happen in these books feel very impactful because nothing is forever. The ending of this book leaves off on a cliffhanger that I think ultimately isn't going to matter very much. It is kind of giving ACOTAR. There's so many things that I feel like overlap with ACOTAR, and that's not to say that I feel like this is like a ripoff. I don't see it that way, but there are similarities to be drawn. So I don't know, maybe if you like that series but you're wanting something that feels even more YA and youthful, like maybe this could be a fun series for you. It's not identical, and like there's definitely some differences, but this just wasn't my favorite. In terms of how I would rate this book, I think 2 stars. I just really think that the pacing, the characterization, the lack of concrete plot resolution, it's just frustrating to me as a reader. This is just not something that I really enjoyed. And you know, the frustrating thing too is that like I have the entire trilogy in hardcover at this point. Like I have all of these books. So, you know, I'm left with books that I probably am not gonna want to keep, which is frustrating. I really thought that this was gonna be something that I was gonna like and get the hype behind, and I simply don't. So if you would like to win these books, I can send these to you. If you live in the United States, leave your Instagram handle in the comments. I will send these to you via USPS media mail. I'll get them to you. There are, unfortunately, some greasy fingerprints. Those are not left by me. I mean, if they're free, they're free. You know what I mean? I feel like, who cares? But anyway, yeah, 2 stars. This is just not, it's just not it for me. Okay, so I am 50% into Next of Kin by Hannah Bonham Young, I believe is her name. And I'm enjoying it. It's a hard one for me to fully put into words or fully like criticize, because it's clear to me that this is this author's first book, or like one of her first books. And I really, really liked Out on a Limb. But Next of Kin is a book that I feel like could have used a little bit more workshopping in the relationship department. So this book's about our 2 main characters, Chloe and Warren. They are both trying to take custody of their younger siblings. Warren is trying to take custody of his younger brother Luke, who is, I believe, 15 and is deaf. So he has been in a group home for a while. It's just not a good fit. And obviously Warren would prefer to have custody of his brother. And then Chloe is gaining custody of her infant sister, who she just found out about. Chloe is 24. Her sister's obviously a newborn, and her mom, Chloe and Willow, the baby's mom, is an addict. So she cannot have custody of her child at the moment. And so she's asking her daughter to take care of her other daughter. And immediately Chloe is going to take on this responsibility, but she wasn't really anticipating having to do anything like this. She is I guess you could say contract employee, a freelancer, and she doesn't have a regular W-2 income, so she doesn't really look great on paper. And then Warren is someone who makes a good income but doesn't have the space that he needs to provide for his brother. So they live in a 1-bedroom, and he needs to live in a 2-bedroom basically to be able to, I guess, fulfill the requirements of being a foster parent. And so there's this program, I guess, in like foster care or in CPS where you can pair up 2 different, I guess, foster parents who have maybe like conflicting situations again. So like she has the bigger apartment, he has the money, they combine resources and have to prove, I guess, over like a 5 or 6 month period that they can, I guess, provide for their respective siblings. So it's an interesting story. I liked the initial tension between Warren and Chloe because it's not an enemies to lover situation by any means, but they definitely have conflicting parenting styles and just conflicting ways of doing things. One thing, let me just mention really quick so I don't forget, that I really like is that Luke is deaf and our heroine's adoptive father is also deaf, so everyone can like communicate really well, and I just think it's like an added like neat thing in the story. But like I was saying, Chloe and Warren, they have this like sort tensiony situation in the beginning because they don't really get along, and I feel like that created a nice tension. And once they strike up a tentative friendship, it's not that I feel like that's necessarily a bad thing or that all tension is broken. I just feel like the pacing of them starting to like each other feels a little bit quick. Like at this 50% mark, our heroine already knows that she loves the hero, and I feel like that's just a little bit too quick, especially given some of the actions of the hero. There's like one situation that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. He kind of like yells at the heroine, and while it is explained, and I do think that people are allowed to lose their temper from time to time and like apologize for it, I just feel like I needed a few more situations after that for Warren to kind of redeem himself and make him feel like a more, I guess, wholesome, well-rounded guy. Not that he's a bad guy by any means, but I don't know, besides his love of children and like him kind of helping take care of Willow, I'm just not totally convinced that like him and the heroine really are a good match. Like I know he thinks she's hot and vice versa, but like, I don't know. It just seems a little bit fast, but I'm not mad at this book. And like, I definitely understand why people enjoy this one so much. Obviously, Out on a Limb was recommended more often to me for this video, but when I saw that Next of Kin was pretty high up as well, I was like, okay, I'm gonna read it because I know I like this author and I wanted to read more from her. So, you know, we'll see how things progress and how things go, but I am planning on finishing this book tonight and I will let you know my final thoughts and feelings. Jump fucking scare. Okay, so I finished the book. I'm also doing my skincare routine. I was just realizing too, I have like a really cute little bald spot right here, so everybody gets to see that. Yay! Also, I'm sure the lighting's gonna be weird in here because there's LEDs. Anyway, this was fine. I think I'm gonna give it 3 stars. The ending was super cute, which I can appreciate, you know, as a cute endings sort of epilogue ass bitch. But that being said, I do feel like the I love yous a touch excessive. It felt like they came a little too early, and I really just, I think ultimately didn't like the hero, which is hard because I understood where he was coming from. Like I really wanted to sympathize with him and like feel for him, but I just couldn't because near the end of the book he punches fucking drywall, and I don't like that, and I think a lot of people don't like that. We're supposed to be convinced that he's not gonna hurt the heroine. It like scares the baby. I don't know. To me, that's not like the conflict I want at the end of a book. Like that's just really not it for me. Red flag. I think had that not happened, had the I love yous been toned down just a touch, and the orgasms not been so excessive, I think I would have given this maybe like 4 stars. Which is such a bummer because like I really do like this author. Slugging, by the way. But it just didn't do it for me, really. It's a bummer, but you know what? I like this author and I would recommend her stuff, so I can see what other people would see on this. I'm not totally disappointed with this being one of y'all's favorite books of the year, especially if you're just trying to like soak up all of the good books that this author has written, or perhaps if this was your first book by this author, maybe this one like drew you in and you really liked this one and maybe you read her better stuff afterwards. I don't know, but yeah, it's gonna be a 3 star for me and I'm fine with that. But I think this is the end of the road for the vlog, and I'm ending it in like such a beautiful way. Obviously, I need to put the sheets on my bed and then I need to go to the fuck to sleep. My throat's hurting a little bit and I can't tell if it's because I've been talking to this camera all day or if it's because I'm getting sick, and I'm just praying to God I'm not getting sick. So yeah, I'm gonna go. I'll see y'all in the next one. Did I say I was starting Manacled? That was a lie. That book I have started. I'm like 7% into, and I feel like I've been reading it for fucking hours. So I decided to pick up something else in the meantime, as I try to slog my way through the Harry Potter fan fiction that y'all decided you wanted me to read. Anyway, I picked up Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. I had no idea what this book was before starting this video. I have not heard anyone talk about this book, and I just assumed it was a mystery thriller, which it kind of is, I guess. And it's interesting because I feel like this is one of those books that ends up on a lot of people's best of list because 1 or 2 people who have like a lot of notoriety talk about it. I don't know who that person is in the book community this year, but I've never heard about this book. It doesn't seem like a typical mystery thriller kind of pick for a lot of people, so it just surprises me, I guess, that this is a book that is on people's radar. But let me tell you both the book's about and how I'm feeling about it. This book's about our main character, Ernest, and at the start of the story, he is hit up by his brother, Michael, who I believe is a couple of years older than him. Michael's like, hey, I need your help. I actually hit someone with my car, and they're not doing so good, so let's put them in a ditch that we dig ourselves. And Ernest is like, yeah, I'm not really sure about that, but okay, sure. So he helps his brother, but then he promptly calls the police and testifies against him in court. So Michael goes to jail, until a few years later when Michael gets out of jail, and then shit starts going awry again. And we start uncovering family secrets about Ernest and his family, his siblings and his aunt, and like all of the different people in his life. Everybody's on this sort of like family vacation, I believe. They're on this trip together and they're in this, I think, like snowy remote place. Someone winds up dead. Michael couldn't have done it because he wasn't actually there when this crime took place. place, or so we think. Like, there's a time between when he got released from prison and then when this crime occurred. And I guess technically he could have done it, but he wasn't actually in the place, whatever. Anyway, he has an alibi. So Ernest is trying to kind of solve this crime and also exonerate his brother, I guess, or like make sure his brother doesn't go to jail for this crime. Also, their dad is dead for reasons that we find out as the book unfolds. I don't want to spoil it all for you, right? It's a mystery thriller. This is interesting. It kind of reminds me in some ways of like a Leanne Moriarty book. I think I've read one book by her, and it's not one of her more popular ones. I think it's like The Apple Never Falls or something like that. It has apples on the cover. It's like about a tennis family, and I think it's like a mystery thriller a little bit, but like mostly more of a family saga. Ernest, by the way, his job is he's not a detective, he's not a writer, but he writes for writers. So basically he tells people like how to write mystery thrillers well, and like some staples of the genre that you have to kind of adhere to. That's like sort of his thing, and so I guess that's kind of like how he's using his skills to like help his brother. I don't know. It's interesting, I guess. I am surprised that this one is one that so many people recommended and really enjoyed. It's not bad, but besides the fun cover and the fun premise, I don't feel like the prose and the storytelling is really living up to the promises, I guess. Like, there are some funny quips or whatever, and like some asides as if Ernest is talking to us, but I'm just kind of like not that into it. Like, it's fine, but I'm not like, oh my god, what is happening next? There's just a lot of fucking talking with Ernest and like some of the women in his life, like his stepsister. I don't know, I just don't really care. Also, I'm like not loving the infertility content. I don't think this is a spoiler, and if it is, fuck you. That was aggressive, but I'm not sorry. There is a storyline that involves someone leaving their partner because their partner is infertile, and I do not like that. I understand people can be shitty people in books, but it upset me. I think that's a shitty thing to do. I don't know how I feel about this book. It's fine. Like, I think this might be a 3-star read for me. Like, I'm just not getting it. You know what I mean? Like, the first book I got, because like, why fantasy, romance, everybody loves that shit, okay? Like, I get that. Makes sense. Checks out. Next of Kin, even if it wasn't a banger for me, I get that one too. This one I just don't get. I don't know. I'm not understanding it, and maybe I'm just like missing something. I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below if this was one of your faves or one that you recommended, because I feel like I might be missing something here, but we'll see. I'm gonna finish it off and I'll let you know my final thoughts and feelings. Much to talk about, much to discuss. So I finished Everyone in My Family's Killed Somebody, someone. You get the gist. And I've also gotten 50% into Hellbent, so let's talk about it. This first book, I understand why people enjoy this book. I just didn't really mesh with it. And I think I was telling all that in the first clip, that this just didn't seem like it was something that was ultimately going to connect with me, which is so weird because it's a mystery, which I prefer over like the sort of cheap thrills of a thriller. But for me, I think that the main issue with the story is not much happens until the very end, and the very end is so unbelievable that it took me completely out of the story. I'm someone who really likes when endings to mystery thrillers feel grounded in reality, feel like something could actually happen, and that was just absolutely not the fucking case here. And you know, I know that this will appeal to someone, and I get it, because this book is also told in a way that is unique. You've got a main character who really understands mysteries and who is like providing commentary along the way, which I think is a fun idea, but the execution was just completely lacking for me, and I just feel like the story is very middle of the road. To be completely honest with you, I finished this book a few days ago, and even trying to discuss it now, I'm like, shit, I can't remember much, which I think says just a lot about the overall quality of the story. No shade to anyone who liked this. I think this is for a particular kind of reader. I think if you like a sort of like fun mystery thriller, I think you'd like this. Like, if you like the Finlay Donovan series, I think this is a book you might enjoy, because it has that like main character who's supposed to be charming, and it feels a little non-traditional, and maybe you're looking for something new and different. I just don't think that I necessarily was. So 3 stars. It was fine, but just nothing really to write home about. Something that I could write multiple pages to home about would be Hellbent, though. 50% into this one, and it is really, really great. I am genuinely really enjoying this book, and I was sort of unsure of how to feel, because I feel like I really enjoyed Ninth House, but I feel like it left off on this cliffhanger ending that either could be picked up from immediately and like we're gonna hit the ground running, or it could be sort of like a retread and a misdirection sort of thing at the beginning of this book, and that really wasn't the case. This book really picks up where Ninth House leaves off, and it sort of takes you directly from there. And as someone who just finished my reread of Ninth House, I feel like that was super, super satisfying for me as a reader. And essentially the story is about Alex trying to she's trying to find Darlington, and she has some help in doing it. She actually has to enlist the help of a few different people, one of which is Dawes, who we learned about from the first book, and then also a couple of other side characters, one of which I think we know, and then the other character who I don't remember from the first book, to be honest, but could have been in that book. And they all kind of all four of them team up together to help get Darlington out from where he is. And of course, in typical Leigh Bardugo fashion, there's also just a lot of other kind of complicating factors in the story. You've got complicated relationships, you've got like another mystery plotline that kind of comes in, and of course you're dealing with the secret societies as well. So I am liking this book so far. I think my only complaint is that at this 50% mark, we know Darlington, we've seen Darlington, but we're not really getting a lot of interaction with him, and it does frustrate me as someone who went an entire book basically without him. I mean, sure, we got like some mentions of him, I guess, and we got to like see flashbacks of him, but I kind of wanted them to like immediately grab him at the very beginning of Hellbent, and then like the plotline completely changes and we do some other stuff. The main through line of this book is that we're finding Darlington, we're getting him out, we're going to make sure that he has a soul or whatever, because like we're not sure if he's a demon, I guess. I'm satisfied with the way the plot's moving, but I'm ultimately a little confused as to where the story's going, though the world is expanding in interesting ways, so we'll see. I'm having a good time with it, and you know, I'm hoping that I can report back that this is a 5-star read, you know, that this will be like the first 5-star read of this video, but that feels like a big ask. That feels like a big ask. All right, so I finished Hellbent and I enjoyed this book. I honestly thought that it would be a 5-star read for me, so I'm a little sad to say that it is a 4-star, but I still feel like this was a really fun one. I think my hesitation with trying to give this book 5 stars is that as quick moving as the plotline was, as well paced as the book was as a whole, I feel like a lot of the same thing just happened over and over again, and I feel like by the title of the book and just like the vibes of this book, you can kind of tell what that event is, but it happens like no less than 3 times. And I feel like because the world's expanding, because we're getting these new characters to interact with, I just wanted there to be new settings for those interactions to take place. And like maybe that's asking too much, but I feel like if Leigh could do anything, it is write a well-plotted, well-paced story that has a lot of original ideas. So I guess I was just a little disappointed that we kept doing the same thing over and over again. And it made sense, but I was also kind of like this, it ended up feeling a little more sophomore than I wanted it to. It felt a little bit too second booky than I wanted it to, but like it wasn't a bad book. It was definitely a good time, and I'm so glad that we finally had a banger on this list, a banger for this video, because I feel like I've just had like 2-star after 2-star, and I'm just ready to love all of the books that y'all love. So yeah, I am overall really happy with this one, and I think if you haven't picked it up, you should. If you're a Ninth House fan, I think you'll really like this, and I'm really excited to see how the series finishes out. I don't know if it's going to be a 3-book series. I'm pretty sure that it is, and I'm excited to pick that one up whenever it comes out. I'm sure it'll be a hot fucking second because Leigh has a different book coming out, a standalone, in 2024. I'm not mad about it, but like also I'm gonna forget everything that I read in this book. Anyway, I don't know what I'm picking up next, but I will pop back in when I am 50% into whatever it is I'm reading. Hello, from me and this one hair. I'm 50% into The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, not sure how she says it, but I can tell you a bitch knows how to write a book, or at least she knows how to write a book this year. I think this is the second year that one of her books has made it on the Goodreads Choice Award nominee list. I didn't love The Dead Romantics, which was her first book, I believe. This, however, I am enjoying, surprisingly. I didn't want to pick this one up. I wouldn't have picked this up on my own, but I purchased this a few months ago because I was like, you know what? I think this is going to make it onto the Goodreads Choice Awards, and guess what? She was right, folks. This book's about our main character, Clementine, which don't love. I think we could come up with a better name for a main character that doesn't feel so fucking quirky. But Clementine is dealing with the death of her aunt, Annalie, spelled anally. She's sad. She's not having a great time. And her aunt has left her this apartment that is supposedly magical. And in this apartment, it can time travel, or it can be a place of time travel for 7 years. So like 7 years in the past or 7 years in the future. And our heroine discovers that this random man is in her apartment, and he is from 7 years in the past. And she does not communicate this information to him, but she instead like engages in a semi-romantic roommates sort of situation with him for a few days until he disappears mysteriously, and like the apartment no longer time travels, I guess. Outside of the apartment, she is dealing with a lot of stuff in her professional life. She is potentially going to get a really big promotion, but to kind of bag this promotion and to kind of like prove that she is as good as she has been as a publicist, she's supposed to land this really prestigious chef, and he is going to write a cookbook for them. Because I guess the publisher that she works for does like travel guides and cookbooks mostly. So anyway, she's supposed to get this guy, land him, and it's like a time travel romance kind of. I think the writing of this is really fantastic. I didn't expect to like this premise because I don't really like when the whole premise or crux of a romance is based on something that just logically cannot be overcome. And I know that that's silly because a lot of my most favorite romance tropes are ones where like things are forbidden. And I guess this isn't that far off, but you're telling me this man only knew her 7 years ago. And like, does he actually know who she is in present day? Is this like a fake scenario? I don't know. It's sort of confusing, the rules of the world, or like not even confusing, but we just haven't really figured out exactly what this means. Like, yes, she knew this guy 7 years ago, or like 7 years in the past, but does he know her? I don't know. I don't know how the rules of this are going to shake out, but the writing is just so charming. I love the kind of instant chemistry I felt between Clementine and Ewan, I believe is his name. He is this like auburn-haired chef who has a real passion for cooking and making food for others, and just like he just has a real zest for life, which I think is really charming. I have no idea how this romance is going to shake out. I am very curious to see if there are more flashback scenes or if that's like all we're getting. I'm assuming there's going to be more, but generally speaking, I'm having a good time with this. I think the exploration of grief is nice and not overdone. I mean, everybody's definition of overdone is going to be different. I'm fine with hard topics being handled in romance, but I don't really like when the romance is overshadowed by kind of like really, really hard-hitting topics like that. And I felt that way about The Dead Romantics. This is a little bit more bearable because it's not like that. And also, I believe the hero in this isn't fucking dead, which I think is the case in that one. I can't remember. I don't really care. This one, however, I'm liking. And actually, I think this will probably be one of my more favorite books that I'm reading for the vlog portion of this video. I could see this like being a 4 or 5 star read. I don't know. Stranger things have definitely happened. I guess like time traveling 7 years for some good dick. Okay, bye. Basic bitch alert. This was so good. I am sort of at a loss for words about this book. It was kind of perfect in every way. It was deeply romantic. The writing was snappy. It handles hard-hitting topics without overtaking the main plot line. The banter between hero and heroine is just spot on and perfect, and it's just deeply romantic. Like, this book is perfect, and I am shocked. I would not have wanted to pick this up. I didn't want to pick this up after reading The Dead Romantics. That book was not bad, but it was not great. It was not something that I personally connected with. However, this is really, really great, and the sort of like weird premise is something that I am willing to overlook. I didn't expect this to be one of the tops of this video, and yet here we are with a 5 star read. I'm not mad at it. I'm the opposite of mad at it, actually. This might make it onto my best romances of the year list. I think if you are looking for something that really checks all the boxes, sweet, sexy, charming, romantic, this is it. This is it for you. You're not gonna get in-depth fucking corn shucking good times, but there is sex in this book, so I mean, if you're upset at that, like, I don't know, get over it. This book was really good. And you might be asking yourself, Chandler, okay, like, where is this ranking? All right, I have picked up another book, another one of your favorites, 50% into Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Doing my first update when I'm tired probably wasn't the best idea, but that's fine. At least I think this book's by Rebecca Ross. I don't even know who the fuck that is. This person and this book. I have heard so many good things about this book. So many people on the TL, on Goodreads, Instagram, YouTube, wherever, have been talking about this book and saying it's great. And I didn't really know what this book was going into it, and I can't say that I really get it now, but I'll try to explain it and not spoil it, which is gonna be kind of hard. If learning anything about the plot of a book is spoilers to you, then maybe don't listen to this. But also, why are you watching this video? Because like, that's just how I talk about books. But I'm gonna try not to like spoil anything super special. Basically, this book's about our 2 main characters, Iris and Rowan, I believe, and they both work at a newspaper. They're kind of competing for a promotion, competing to, I guess, like a full-time job there, or like be a feature writer. I don't know. Honestly, couldn't tell you what their job's supposed to be, except for that they write articles for this newspaper. And this is kind of an important job, I guess, because there is a war going on in their country. Essentially, the gods have reawakened. The gods have been asleep for hundreds of years. The gods are now awakened, and Lady God and Man God are fighting each other. He was trying to kind of like oppress her. It's kind of giving like Hades and Persephone vibes, except for he doesn't actually love Persephone, and he just like wants to use her for her music and keep her underground, and she's like, no bitch, I don't want that. That's sort of like the war that's going on. And so Enva, that's the lady god, has like played her special music and gotten people to want to enlist in the war to help her fight against Dacre, I think is how you say it. What a name. So Iris and Roman are not really writing about the war, but the war is going on, and so I don't know. Iris is kind of a poor girl who's living with an alcoholic mother. Her brother is conscripted into the war. Not even, he volunteered. What am I talking about? He volunteered. And then Roman is like a well-to-do man, and he has been promised in marriage to someone he doesn't want to marry and who he thinks is a bad person, which is really fun and exciting. Up until this point, Iris and Roman have been rivals, shall we say. They are competing for the same job. I don't really feel like their interactions at the beginning of the book feel very rivalsy, though. If you're looking for enemies to lovers, I do not fucking feel like this is it at all. It's barely even rivals to lovers. They're competing for the same job, whatever. And they both respectively are also writing letters to the other person, and they don't know who the other person is. So our girl writes a letter to her brother, and then she puts it in her wardrobe, and oh my god, the letter disappears. And so she keeps doing this, and she keeps thinking that these letters are going to her brother, until one day the person who she's sending these letters to, or the letters are disappearing to, replies and is like, hey, I'm not your brother, but I'll write letters to you. And so they write letters back and forth. Meh, meh, meh. It's Roman and Iris, and he knows who he's writing to. She doesn't know who she is writing to. And that's the story, kids. That's how the cookie crumbles. That's the setup of this book. I feel like the description of this book, of the synopsis of this book, kind of tells you what's going on. I initially was like not super into this book for a couple of reasons. One, there's a thing thing that happens at the 20% mark of this book that is supposed to be sad but actually made me laugh, which I don't know what that says about me, but also I think the execution was poor. Like there wasn't enough emotional attachment for me to care that this happened. And then I also felt like it was a little bit contrived the way that the relationship building was going to be. Like there's magical typewriters or there's a magical portal and these two can send letters back and forth to each other and they don't know who the other person is, but they're getting to know each other this way, even though they're enemies in real life. It felt a little contrived to me. It felt like a lazy way to world build and a lazy way to get these characters to get to know each other. And I still maintain that it kind of is. However, I think it kind of plays into the greater world building of the story. Not them like literally writing letters to each other about the world, but the world definitely has like magic imbued in it that we don't really know much about. And so I think it's interesting to have this like sort of like a magical portal, magical typewriter sort of situation. And our heroine did something very bold around the 30% mark of this book that I was not expecting and has made the story a lot more interesting. And again, I don't know if it's in the synopsis of the book, so I'm not going to spoil it, but what she does is interesting and I'm actually intrigued, which is shocking me. Honestly, my goal for the rest of the night is to take my makeup off, floss, brush, water pick, mouthwash, hop into bed in my PJs, and not move until I finish this book. I love that idea. I love that for me. I've been up all day. I was actually just not actually doing anything that intense. I was out of town, shall we say, antiquing, which was fun, but I didn't have much time to read, didn't have much time to chill. Now I'm gonna do both those things. I'll be back tomorrow to let you know my final thoughts and feelings on this book, and then we can also talk about a book that I finished and didn't vlog about. Miss Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. All right, friends, after many a day, I am finished with Divine Rivals, and I figure we could talk about my final thoughts and feelings and move on to Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. Okay, first up, Divine Rivals. I cannot tell you how fucking long it took me to finish this book. I actually can tell you, I did start reading this initially months ago, but for this read through, it took many a day. And it's kind of wild. I got to the 50% mark and I was starting to get more intrigued by the story, especially because it kind of turned in a way that I wasn't prepared for. Things got a little bit more thrilling. It wasn't just this back and forth story about letters. And it's weird because I love a good epistolary or like, you know, writing letters kind of tale. I think it's kind of fun. Execution of this one just like, it was not my favorite at the beginning. Then things kind of get more exciting. We have characters moving to different parts of places. They kind of move from just staying in one location, which is Oath, like the main city, and they have many an adventure. It's like, I don't really want to spoil it because like, I think if you want to read this book, you should go in not knowing much, but we have characters doing interesting things. And so I was like, okay, things are getting more spicy and exciting, not spicy in like the sexual sense, but anyway, we have characters, they're moving places, they're doing things, which is what you want from a plot, duh. But once I got to the 50% mark, things got glacial for me, which is kind of interesting and kind of wild because things were definitely moving. But I think when we have sort of a reunion between our two main characters, I got bored. I got seriously bored. And I don't think it's a secret or really a spoiler to say that they get separated at a point kind of early on in the book and then they come back together. And the coming back together, I like should be invested because I should care about these characters getting together. But like one lone high-rated Goodreads reviewer said, where is the chemistry? I was not feeling the chemistry between Roman and Iris, I think is her name. I literally just finished this book and I can barely remember the bitch's name. I don't feel it. It's like there are a couple of times when I have read books by authors and I can tell that they are pouring their soul into it and they are trying to get us to understand through really flowery language that these two are just so well suited, whether they're writing each other letters or they're expressing themselves through words. It's like, I perish, I pine, I would die without you, your letters keep me going, like shit like that, stuff that feels a little bit like melodramatic. A lot of authors kind of do that and I think a lot of people love that. I'm not one of those people. And I wish that I were. And it's like, I hate being a contrarian because it seems like everybody loves this book. And I even put a message in my Discord channel where I was like, hey, am I just a hating ass bitch? Or like, do other people not like this book too? And it turns out I am just a hating ass bitch, I guess. I'm just like, I really just don't see the connection between Roman and Iris very much. Like, especially since a lot of their relationship, I guess, is kind of built on a lie in the sense that Roman knows who she is and she doesn't know who he is when they are corresponding via their typewriters. So like the chemistry just wasn't really doing it for me. And then we get towards like the 70-80% mark of the book and we kind of get a crescendo of plotline. The way that I want to spoil this book is, you know what? I'm putting a spoiler warning. I don't give a fuck. Skip it if you don't want to hear. Here we go. Why is there a marriage in this book? The only thing that I could think is that this author for some reason has some sort of like, I guess, moral obligation, I guess, to not have premarital sex in a YA book. Like, why are these characters getting married and then fucking? Also, how is everybody so okay with it? Sure, I guess you could say it's the 1800s and like they're 19, they can fuck. dubious at best. It's like she finds out that this man has been lying to her, right? She finds out the man's been lying to her, and she's upset at this, rightfully so, right? So it takes her a day, but then she finds out that because her baby boo was injured, he's not recovering well because she is not taking care of him, and she is not being like there for him emotionally. So she gets over her own shit, and she goes to him, and she's like, you know what? I do love you. And he's like, I want to propose to you. Like, you're my everything. Like, I don't want to go another day not married to you. And I'm just like, we are really going from 0 to 95 real quick, and there's just no fucking reason for it whatsoever. That aside, the ending of this book, I didn't like either. I didn't like the ending of this book. I felt like it was sort of just a setup for the next book, which, like, obviously you're writing a series, you want your first book to set up the next book or like lead into the next book, but I feel like this entire book was a setup for the next book. There was very little in the way of plot in this book. Like, yes, we get to see the war and we get to see kind of what happens in war, which is definitely a thing, I guess, you know, people die and there's, you know, people getting exploded, which is not ideal. I am not a fan of that. I don't really like reading wartime books for that reason, but beyond that, I don't feel like a lot was done here. I feel like we still don't know much about this war, and again, you know, I understand we're gonna probably find out more in the second book, but yeah, I can't lie. I fail to understand the appeal of this one. Like, I understand the appeal. It's just not appealing to me. So, with that being said, I feel like I've been really going in on this book, but not really saying much. It's basically just that the vibes were off, and I didn't feel the chemistry between the characters, and a lot of the dramatic moments kind of made me giggle, and also, like, no, I just feel like if I were gonna fuck someone, I probably wouldn't tell, like, everyone around me so that they could, like, help me set up the perfect fuck shack. It's just a little weird. I don't know. This book is actually 3-star. It was fine. It was, like, genuinely so fine, so forgettable, so not a book series I want to continue on with, but I'm glad it exists for the lads who like it, you know? It's a thing, okay? It's a thing that I don't get, but I'm happy it exists for people who like romance. Let's talk about Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Fairies, hopefully before my camera dies. I thought I had a full camera battery, but they lied to me, okay? This was bad. I really did not enjoy this book. And the sad thing is that it could have been so charming, except for Emily is insufferable. This book's about Emily Wilde. She lives in England, and I believe she's a professor at Cambridge or something like that, or a researcher there. I'm not entirely sure. It doesn't really matter. But she is a researcher of fairies, and she is finally going to go on this trip, I guess, to start writing her Encyclopedia of Fairies, right? Like, the book title for this book is very on the nose. She has an interest in fairies, a very academic interest, but people don't really, I guess, respect her much in the field because this is a field. She's not like a kooky eccentric. This isn't something that she's like making up. I guess a lot of other people believe in fairies in this society. Maybe they do exist in this society. I don't really know. But she goes to a foreign country and a foreign city and doesn't really vibe with the inhabitants. They don't really understand her because she's very socially awkward. And she gets some lodgings. She's trying to, I guess, document the different fairies that are in this particular vicinity. But she is unfortunately interrupted by one of her like rivals and or nemesis, kind of, Wendell, who she suspects is like a greater fairy, not like a tiny little fairy, but like, you know, a high fae kind of fairy, just because of the way that everybody around him seems to be so charmed by him. And there's no other explanation for that than the fact that like he is a fairy, right? Like, you can't just be a charming individual, you have to be a fairy. So he basically bangs a lot of other people while they're in this town and kind of tries to foil all of her hard work. And he says, hey, I know that you're not invited to the fairy conference, but how about you let me help you with your research and I will get you into this fairy conference that you would like to be a part of. And she's like, okay, Wendell, even though it's not me screaming your name every night, I'm down with this idea. And so begins our story. And I wish that I could say more happens. That is just simply not true, okay? Where to begin? Emily is the worst. I understand that there are characters who are quirky and socially awkward. She was just rude and kind of annoying, and her relationship with Wendell, I think, is supposed to be this charming sort of like grumpy sunshine thing where she's grumpy and he's sunshine, but he was just kind of lazy and irritating, and she was kind of shrill, and I do not like putting that on women, right? Like, I am all for prickly people, but the prickly people I've been reading lately have gone past prickly and been just downright rude and unpleasant to read about. Emily is the problem in this story for sure. Honestly, this kind of has some of the same issues that I have with Divine Rivals, where it's like, okay, you're building us to believe that these two characters should be together, and yet I don't see it. I do not see the character compatibilities, more so here than in the other book, but I don't see the character compatibilities, and then they go from being kind of rivals to tentative friends to, oh my god, I've been in love with you this entire time, let's get married. And that just feels like a little bit of a rush. And I think this book maybe handles it a little bit better, but not much. I don't think they get married. I don't know. It's a mess. it is a mess, and it was not a fun narrative to read about because it was from her perspective, right? It was like a first person narrative, and occasionally be at Wendell's point of view in the latter part of the book, but for the majority it's just her like narrating what's happening with the townsfolk and her trying to meet up with fairies, and it should be exciting, but it's not exciting. It is not exciting. It is not a fun book. And inevitably I always run into these kinds of books, and I actually kind of think that this book and Divine Rivals sort of fall into the same category of cozy, although can War really be cozy? Cozier, slower paced historical fantasies, and I know a lot of people love that sort of thing. I've noticed that over the years as I've had to read books for different list videos and things like that, and that is just not a genre or like particular avenue that I tend to gel with, right? I did start the audiobook for One Dark Window, and I'm liking that a little bit more. That also is kind of a historical fantasy, so I guess this is just the year of historical fantasies. Wow. But yeah, this one, wow, did not like. This one I liked less than Divine Rivals. I think because Divine Rivals, like, it wasn't my cup of tea, but it kind of knew what it was doing. That one's a 3-star for me. This one's definitely a 2-star. It wasn't poorly written in terms of grammar or like cheap tricks or anything, but insufferable narrator and kind of a dry way of telling the story made it just not fun. Just not a fun book to try to slog through. So again, this is another situation where it's just very clear that I just have very different taste than some of my subscribers, and that's okay. I really like that here, actually, and it is sort of, I guess, reassuring in a sense. One of my favorite things to receive, if you didn't know, are comments from people who say that they love watching my videos, even though we have completely different taste, or they never read romance. I love that, and it's also encouraged me to, I guess, branch out a little bit. Don't get me wrong, I love romance, I'll always love romance, but, you know, thinking ahead to like 2024, I want to branch out. I want to read stuff that's not just romance, and y'all give me courage to do that, even if maybe your tastes are a little questionable. So this is a 2-star book for me. I don't get it. I don't get it. I'll never get it. I'll never get it. I think that the idea of screaming the name Wendell in bed sounds awful, but I advocate for your right to be able to do that. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm gonna finish doing makeup and change into my clothes for the day, and then we can talk about other books. I've actually started all of the next 3 books. I'm halfway into The Boys of Tommen #1. I always forget the name, by Nick 13. I've started One Dark Window today, which I've been enjoying, and then Manacled I started a while ago. I mean, like technically a couple of years ago. I picked it back up. I'm like 8% in, which is actually kind of a lot for that book because holy shit, it's long. That's gonna be the last one we read, but I think today, game plan, finish Binding 13, talk about it, and also read a little bit of One Dark Window. I think that would be like a good cozy way to finish off the night, and then tomorrow I can torture myself by trying to read all of Manacled in a day. Can I do it? Probably not, but I'm gonna try. I'm damn sure gonna try. All right, we are on to our next book, Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. I told y'all in the last clip that I've already gotten to 58% into this book. Also, I hate apologizing for things because I feel like it's an annoying YouTuber thing, but my husband's cooking downstairs if you can hear that. My apologies. I hope it's not too distracting. But this book is about our 2 main characters, Johnny and Shannon. I had to look at the back because I couldn't remember those generic names. But this is an interesting one in the way that it starts out. Shannon, our heroine, is, I believe, 15 at the start of the story, and she is being abused by her father and also is facing a lot of horrible bullying at her public school in Ireland. And we get fairly detailed accounts, I would say, at the beginning of this book as to how she's being treated. And it is just relentless, the bullying she faces from not only girls at her school, but also boys. And eventually it gets to the point where her mom is like, I don't want this for you anymore. We're going to send you to a private school. And so she goes to a school called Tommen, and she is treated much better there, though on her first day, I think she's like, I was going to say kicked in the head. I think a ball hits her head as she's like walking across the rugby pitch. She is injured, which she's like obviously not super thrilled about. Her mom's not happy about this, but she comes into contact and meets this guy named Johnny. He is like the star rugby player at their school, and he is, I think, 18 or something like that. He's definitely older than her and doesn't think that she is suitable for him because she's 15, which, you know, I appreciate the restraint there because that's not often the case in romance novels. But this story and the way that it is paced is fairly glacial. This story is supposed to be the romance between Johnny and Shannon, but at this 50% mark, we have not gotten into romantic territory really. I think she might like reach out to kiss him at one point, but like there's not a whole lot of romance going on. It's really just about the sort of like day-to-day goings on of these 2 characters and just how they live their lives, and they don't have a lot of interaction with each other, but we get to know Johnny and like this pressure that he faces. He has an injury that he's recovering from and not having a very good time at recovering, which is tough because he wants to have a professional career after high school, obviously. And then with Shannon, she's just trying to kind of make ends meet. Her mom is pregnant and is also, I mean, Shannon's also dealing again with the fact that her dad is abusive, and yeah, it's an interesting one. I like the side characters in this book. I feel like the world's fairly fleshed out. I say world, I mean, this is like set in the real world. It's not a fantasy novel, but I feel like the surrounding cast of characters, the school, everything feels very real, which I really appreciate, and I could see how that could draw people in, for sure. I don't know that I love these 2 together, but I am very sympathetic towards both of their characters. Johnny is someone who, again, is like in this kind of sports culture, which can be a little toxic, but he really kind of like fights against that and and he also really sticks up for Shannon too. Even though, again, they don't really hang out together very often, when they are in contact with each other, he sticks up for her. And even though Shannon is doing better at this school, there's still people who are like bullying her a little bit, and so he like sticks up for her and tells people like to leave her alone and things like that. I think mostly because he's associated with Shannon, the girls that also like him because he's a heartthrob are like not happy with it and like kind of pick on Shannon, and so she doesn't really fight against that, but he kind of sticks up for her. And yeah, I don't know, it's a pretty simple story, all things considered. Like there's a lot going on and a lot of side characters, but at the heart this is just the story of like two teenagers and their eventual love story, I'm sure. The one complaint that I have, and this is not even a book complaint, necessarily a story complaint, is that the audiobook for this book is two separate audiobooks. So you have to pay twice to listen to this, which is very irritating. So I got through the first audiobook and now I'm about to start on the second. Yeah, I just feel like I don't, at this point in the novel, I don't have much to say, but I get it. Like I feel like I definitely get this one more than the other ones. Maybe because it's contemporary, I don't know, but it's definitely well written. Also, this is like set, I want to say, in like 2007 or something. Am I like putting that on this book and that's not even true? I don't know. But it's definitely set in the past, which I think is interesting. Yeah, it was January 10th, 2005, a whole new year. Interesting choices all around. I don't know. I'm gonna finish this and I'll let you know my final thoughts and feelings, and we can move on to something else. Something, I guess historical fantasy again, because that's life. Attempt number 3 at filming this clip. I am bad at talking about books. Who would have guessed? After 5 years of doing this on the internet, I'm not good at my job. Let's talk about Binding 13, and then let's also talk about Manacled. I'm 50-ish% into 44. Let's be real. I have not gotten 50% into this long-ass book. Decided to do a little switcheroo because I'm going to be going to my parents' house tomorrow. Listening to the audiobook of One Dark Window just seemed to be more time effective, right? Okay? I'm not going to finish this video before I leave, which is a little disappointing, but that's fine. It's fine. Let me center myself and try to talk about these books. Binding 13 was fine. Not the ending I was expecting or desiring, per se. Especially considering that there was a cliffhanger at the end of the first part audiobook or whatever, because there's like, you know, 1-part audiobook, 2-part audiobook. Cliffhanger, unwelcome, didn't appreciate it. I don't really want to spoil the plot of this book. There's not much to spoil. The story continues on with our characters getting to know each other and growing in physical and emotional affection for each other, which is, you know, cute and appreciated, and I like that. I think really my issue with this book is that it really hinges on the slow burn, okay? And I think that a lot of people, I don't want to say that we're getting Stockholm Syndrome with the slow burn romances we're reading. However, I am saying I think often what I see with slow burn romances is people getting so attached to characters that they're unable to see issues with books. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think you can enjoy books for whatever reason you want. You don't have to see the negatives if you don't want to. That's fine. But this is something that I just keep noticing, and it's kind of abundant here. This book does do a lot of things right. The depiction of abuse, while graphic and on page, the domestic abuse of daughter by father. I think it's important. I feel like I don't often see that, and definitely infiltrates all parts of your life, which is on display here. I also like that our hero's sports injury is affecting his life. It's affecting his everyday. He's in pain, all these things, making the lives and the matters of these two complicated, right? And they find solace in each other, which I don't think is a bad thing. But I feel like the execution of the romance was just lacking. I just fail to understand what is remarkable here. I do think it's sweet that they find things about each other charming, but do they? Do they actually like each other? Or are they just blinded by this like physical attraction? And it's weird because there are like on-page conversations between the two of them. It's not like it's just all lust, but it just feels so basic. And I understand this book is not YA, but the characters are in high school. And so maybe the intricacies of their relationship aren't going to be so intricate. I just feel like it was unexciting to read. There's just a lot of filler, a lot of boring shit going on. And even if this book was made shorter, I don't know if I would like it just because there's just nothing special here. And you're gonna disagree with me, I'm sure, if this is your favorite book. Like, everyone finds something special in their favorite books when maybe someone else doesn't. I hope she gets her happy ending and escapes her shit father, though. Let me just say that for the next book, okay? I won't be reading it, but I hope that happens for her. In terms of rating, I don't know what I'd rate this book because I don't care. I'd give it like 2 or 3 stars. And I don't think the difference between those ratings matters at all. I can appreciate some of what this book does, but it's just like kind of blah. And I spent a lot of time talking about a blah book, so let's move on to something that's a lot less blah. Manacled by Senlin Yu. Fanfiction that you decided that you wanted me to read and that you thought was just amazing and qualified as a best book of 2023. Interesting. If you didn't know, this is Harry Potter fanfiction, so if that is upsetting to you, skip ahead perhaps to the next book. There's time markers, obviously. What's my experience with this? I tried to read this back in 2020 during the pandemic. Someone recommended this as just the most amazing Hermione fanfic, and so I was intrigued, okay? I'd heard nothing but rave reviews, and so I picked it up, and I was intrigued, but it was fucking long. It is over 800 pages of fanfiction, and I'm not particularly attached to Harry Potter. You know, appreciate it for what it is or whatever. Author's a piece of shit, but not enough to like seek out fanfiction, you know what I mean? So it wasn't enough to keep me motivated to read. Now, since y'all said it was your favorite, I decided to pick it back up. I'm only 44% in, and I have been reading this since 2 p.m. It is now 10 p.m. Fanfiction, for the uninitiated, can often be told from different universes, different AUs, if we will, you know? Because it'd be boring if we just, like, wrote fanfiction about characters in, like, real world, or their real world, okay? So in this AU, we have the gang not really winning, right? Like, the Order of the Phoenix, they're kind of not doing so hot. Unfortunately, a lot of Muggle-born women are being given to Death Eaters and Voldemort's homies so that they can be a part of a breeding program, okay? Because their wives, these like pure-blooded wives, are infertile for the most part. And so Hermione gets handed off to Draco and his shitty wife Astoria. She is forced to be sexually assaulted until she gets pregnant with a baby. And also as a part of this, and as a part of her being kept by Draco specifically, that's why she's given to Draco, she is going to have her memory sifted through to see if there are any remaining members of the Order out there who are not dead. And so her mind is also violated. Just violations all around, essentially. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this. On the one hand, this is excellently crafted fanfiction. There is no denying that. In my humble opinion, the writing is fantastic. The world building and the world crafting is really, really fantastic. Like I said, I'm not like the biggest Harry Potter fan, so I'm not sure if this is like very book accurate, you know? It's an AU, so I don't feel like it has to be, but I'm very impressed with it. I think that this fanfiction is, I don't want to say marketed incorrectly. It like definitely is marketed as Handmaid's Tale type shit, but I feel like a lot of people kind of hype this up and fail to mention the repeated graphic on-page depiction of assault. It is a lot to read about. It is not fun to read about. I think I'm conflicted here. I understand what the author is trying to do. They're not trying to condone what is happening. They say this often, and I think that that's true. But I feel like you can all kind of see where this is going, right? Like, this is happening to Hermione, and she's got some like hidden secrets in her brain that she doesn't even know about, that she's keeping from everybody. I think what we're gonna find out, you know, and I don't think this is a spoiler, this is my theory, I think that we're going to find out that she had a relationship with Draco that was consensual and delightful and was like a bright spot during the war, and that she had to hide all of these memories whenever, you know, the Dark Lord won. And so in trying to protect her, Draco's keeping her close to him, but he's having to do this horrible thing to her. I'm very conflicted about that. That's not okay. But at the same time, I can appreciate the duality here, the moral quandaries and moral questions that are being raised and will probably be raised as the story continues. I mean, this is my theory. I don't know that this is what's going to happen, but I think it's pretty clear when reading that that's what's going to happen. I don't know how to feel. I don't know if that's like an okay thing for me personally, because is that justification? Are we saying that that's justified? The author claims that that's not justified, but there are a lot of complicated things here explored, so it's not like I'm trying to point fingers and say this is wrong. I think there's some interesting discussions too about war and what it makes people do. The conflict in this book is that Hermione in the past helping her friends, and she is encouraging her friends to use like dark magic to fight against dark magic, and they are saying no, they don't want to do this, and that would be evil. And she's like, okay, but like we're not gonna fucking win if we don't do this. It's this question of when are certain things justified? Like when are you allowed to do bad things for good reasons? We'll see how these things are handled, I guess, as the story continues. I am very glued to the page. I'm very interested in what happens, but I don't know that at the end of the day I'm gonna feel satisfied at the outcome of the story. But a lot of people say that the story surprised them and that it was fantastic, phenomenal, best thing they've ever read. And I will say, of all the things that I've read for this, besides the 7-year slip, this is the most intriguing to me. It's kept my attention. That being said, am I going to be able to make it through the 800 plus pages? I don't know, but I guess we'll find out. 7 years ago, I finished Manacled by Senlin Yu. It has been quite a fucking while since I finished that book. Here's the thing, I went on a little Manacled hiatus after the last time we spoke, and I was like, okay, let me find something else to read for a little bit, and I did. And then I decided to pick it back up. I don't want to say head over heels in love. I did really fucking enjoy it, okay? I decided to read this when I was on a New Year's trip, and this is the last thing that I read in 2023. I rang in the new year with this fanfiction, and you know, it might be the Stockholm Syndrome talking, but I did quite enjoy it. And I think it's kind of ironic, maybe funny, coincidental, that Senlin is apparently going to rework this and try to publish it traditionally, which I think is fascinating. Where to fucking begin? What to really talk about here? Everything that I said, I feel like stands, and I was really unsure, again, how the assault would be handled and if it was something that could be overcome in this story, and I think that's always going to come down to personal opinion. In my humble opinion, I feel like it was overcome whenever we learn more about the relationship that was formed before the war. I don't really want to spoil too much about this book because you should go in knowing what the fuck happens. I think me telling you some plot points is really going to spoil too much. much, but I liked seeing Draco and Hermione's relationship, and I liked that it wasn't positives before she loses her memories. I was really curious as to how that would be handled, because it was very obvious to me that that was going to be what happened, and I predicted that in the last little bit, but really unsure if we were going to have this relationship between Hermione and Draco that felt realistic to their characters and how they are in the books. And some people agree or disagree on whether or not that is the case, like whether they feel canon, but I personally really liked that their attraction to each other was based on more than just looks. It was more so on how they handled their trauma and how they handled the effects of war. Obviously, Hermione has a lot of issues with her friends and how they handle the effects of war. They don't want to do anything to defeat evil, but Hermione definitely feels that like she wants to do anything she can. Draco feels the same way, so they kind of connect on that level. And there is this kind of consistent push and pull with their relationship, and also the trust that they build is very tentative, and they say things that wound each other, and I found it compelling and I found it interesting, and I just couldn't stop reading after a point. The flashbacks did get a little frustrating. I cared more about the things that happened in the present day. I will say that the flashbacks take up a big chunk of the middle of the book, like most of the book is flashbacks. I didn't really care about the war, to be honest, but I think I rated this like 4 stars on Goodreads before it got taken down, and I enjoyed this one. You know, I think this is not my most enjoyable of the bunch. Obviously, the 7-Year Slip, she's that bitch, but this is very much up there for me. I'm glad I read this. It's fun to, I guess, hop onto a cultural phenomenon like this as well. I like being in the loop. I like knowing what's popular, and I mean, that's why I do these videos in the first place, is to like know what people are into, because I feel like I can get into my own little romance bubble and just like not see what is out there. I don't know, the world of fanfiction has me interested. This fucked, so let's move on, shall we, to a book that I'm not liking. And it's kind of falling into that whole like Encyclopaedia of Faeries vein, which feels a little bit historical and a little bit fantasy and a little bit boring as fuck. One Dark Window by Rachel, is it Gillig? I feel like I had seen this book a couple of times maybe, but I hadn't really seen this one like I saw Encyclopaedia of Faeries or some of the other books that y'all recommended. About our main character, Elspeth, which is a name that I quite like, especially after watching Saltburn. She got the plague, as one does, and in this society, if you get the plague, you gain magic and then are hunted down and killed, basically, because magic's bad in the society or whatever. Elspeth, however, is able to keep her magic under wraps after getting this plague. And actually, I think the magic kind of make people go a little insane, so maybe that's why they are killed, or like, I don't know, die or something. But she survives. She does have magic, but she can hide it, and that's great. And she also has the devil inside her. You know, the devil, he's like the nightmare man. I don't really know what he is, okay? I'm just thinking of like, what do they call that guy? The guy that's like in the corner? Paralysis demon. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So Elspeth, she's got this thing, and I think her mom also contracted the plague. Mom dies. She has the magic. Her dad, he's kind of like a constable. We can think of him that way. He's like a hunt down the magic people and kill them sort of guy, but he doesn't want to kill his daughter, so he's like, okay, you can't live with me, my family, but you can go and live with your mom's sister's family. And so she like has kind of been raised by them. That's kind of the vibe we get in the beginning of the book, that like her life's not great. She's just trying to survive and vibe, deal with the demon in her head that kind of talks to her. The magic that she gained from her plague was the ability, I suppose, to like summon things from these magical cards, and that's like a really big plot point of this book. There's this big dark cloud, similar to Shadow and Bone over you know, the world, and it keeps expanding until we find all of these magical cards and you reunite the magical cards. The mist will continue to spread. So we find out that Elspeth's magic has something to do with the cards. She can like summon things from cards. She can also find cards without looking. She can just like summon and feel the magic. Someone finds this out and is like, yo, you're gonna help me. You're gonna help me hunt down these cards so we can stop the mist. And she's like, I guess I'm gonna use my powers for good, not evil. I am bringing the evil guy in my brain with me though. It's fucking boring. The guy that she's with, his name is Raven, and I'm just thinking, that's so Raven. It's supposed to be this like fake relationship. They're like courting or whatever. She's maybe betrothed fake to this guy so that she can go with him and have a reason to be seen with this man while they go hunt down some cards. It's just not for me. It's simply not for me. It definitely is more action-packed than Encyclopedia of Fairies. Like the vibes are not identical. This is supposed to be kind of like gothic, I believe. It's just not my vibe. I was breaking this down, I think, pretty well today on my reading sprints that I was hosting, where I feel like this book and that Encyclopedia of Fairies bullshit really fall into the category of what I call bookish, right? Are a lot of people who self-identify with the word bookish. Bookish to me is like a certain kind of person, and I don't mean that I don't like these kinds of people, okay? But bookish is a very certain kind of person who really likes certain aesthetics around books, who likes maybe reading books about books, someone who really enjoys like chick lit and cozy romances and cozy fantasies, curling up with a good book. You know what I mean? Like that kind of vibe. I follow quite a few bookstagram accounts, frankly, that have like that vibe, and I almost never get recommendations from them because we don't share the same taste in books. Not to hate. In fact, I wish I were that kind of person who was just like enamored with pretty much everything kind of books, but I don't, and so therefore I don't really like this. Has a lot of words and says very little. I guess is the vibe I get from this. It's just not the kind of fantasy I enjoy. I tend to prefer something a little bit more fast-paced, more interesting character development. Elspeth as a character is not very fascinating or interesting. She does have the demon in her, but like even that relationship is not compelling to me. The demon feels one note, she feels one note. I don't understand her character motivations besides like not getting killed. For her magic, I don't know. It's just like it's not something that I personally really am vibing with. And I know a lot of people love this book and apparently it's a series, but I cannot wait to be done with this. I also can't wait to be done with this video that I started, I think in November. I am going to finish this book. You know, yesterday I was feeling a little stupid about like consistently referring to what's possessing this girl as like a demon, like she's got the devil inside her. That's like the whole fucking book. I mean, that's just like kind of what happens in this book. Downplaying it, that's sort of the vibe. Sort of the vibe of the book. If you were into demon possession or you want some evil man living inside you, this could be the book for you. It's not my vibe, you know? I hate saying that because it's so fucking vague and it doesn't have any literary merit to it, you know what I mean? This isn't like intense criticism, but also it's like if you want that, I don't know, go read like Ferkos or some shit. Like I'm not that. What an experience this has been. Oh, also, I guess I should rate this before we move on. 2 stars. Let's talk about my final thoughts on this video and how I thought this one compared to past years. So nothing is going to beat 2021 because that year was beautiful, stunning, amazing, incredible. Actually like a good year personally, but even more, it was a good year for reading. I feel like the recommendations that I took from y'all were A+, grade A, like top tier books. And then 2022 came around and those ones weren't quite as good. In fact, I struck out so much last year that I was unsure if I was going to pick this video type back up in 2023. And you know what? I'm actually glad that I did it because last year it was like the books that I was reading were books that I couldn't understand how anyone could like. And this time I feel like I am even more firm in my, I guess, understanding of what I like, but I also feel like I had some surprises. You know what I'm saying? Well, then I kind of knew that I would like because I really enjoyed Ninth House, but I didn't expect to like fan fiction. I also really didn't expect to enjoy The 7 Year Slip because I haven't had luck with Ashley Poston or Poston in the past. I am actually glad that I did this, and I feel like the books that I didn't like, they obviously weren't my favorites, were not books that I was scratching my head like, genuinely who the fuck likes this and recommended it. They were just books that weren't really well suited for me. So hopefully by like watching this video, you can find a new read or pick up a book off this list that you have been like maybe thinking about. I'm obviously kind of a harsh critic, but I think there's definitely stuff here for every type of reader. I will definitely be doing this again for 2024. So thanks so much for watching. I love y'all so much, and I'll see you in the next one.